You can do what you want. So hello, welcome. This is class number 117 of Faith and Calm. Tonight's class is about the mysteries of the temple. And we'll begin. So it is in the middle of the 3 weeks. And we have about less than 2 weeks to go till Tisha B'Av. And sure, thank you. So Tisha B'Av is probably the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. It was the destruction of the first and second temples, and many other calamities have happened in that over the period of time, including the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto. So it is a day of sadness. It started with a very first situation, which is after the spies came back after 40 days of wandering in the land of Israel, they brought back a negative report, and the Jews cried the entire night. So, and God said, "Oh, you're crying. I'm going to I'll give you something to this holiday to cry about in the future." Sounds very difficult. I think I explained that in the previous class in the previous year. It's a very strange way to treat your children, you know. Hello, you're crying for nothing, just lollipops. I'll give you whack reasons for you to cry, and then you'll really know. This is it needed some explanation too. Anyway, that's not the point of this class, but maybe I'll cover that too, just so that if somebody sees it, I don't leave them hanging. But I think that will be covered also in this class to some extent. So here we are. We're in the 3 weeks, and and the Rebbe emphasized that during this time, although outwardly it seems like a time of semi-mourning, and there are a lot of customs that we do during this period of time. We don't have weddings, we don't play music, we do other things that, normally a mourner would not do. And that's to drive home the point that everything at life is not always rosy and cheery, and life has both aspects to it. And that's, if you just sort of cut yourself off and numb yourself, then, you're not really experiencing life the way that it really is, If you just say, to somebody who's mourning for somebody important who passed away in their life, just cheer up. It's going to turn out well. Everybody gets over this eventually. That's numbing and amputating your feelings, and feelings are part of life. So there is a time to be sad. There is a time to mourn, but there is also a reason to understand that life does not all go in one path. As I talked about last week a little bit about the idea of the underground streams that come up as well springs, as fountains. So life goes like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Beit HaMikdash, because although it was destroyed, it's very relevant that it's not completely, that there's something there that's going to be rebuilt too. And we're going to try and understand that from a Sikha from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that was said, what was said? That's the date. I'm not on the top of my head. But it was said, it's written up in volume 21 of the Rebbe's Likutei Sichos. So I know what page to find it on. How about that? So much for my memories. So a little overview then about the temple, because I think it'll give you a little understanding of what we're going to talk about today. So I may have shown this in the past. There's this mountain in Jerusalem called Hara Maria. There's a lot of other mountains all around it, and it was just a mountain where Avram Avinu brought. What's it trying to do here? Oh, it's trying to be smart. Where Avram Avinu brought Yitzchak, and where Adam was born and brought his first offering, and where Cain and Abel brought their first offering.
This is the mountaintop.
That's the mountaintop. And then later it's going to be built up. You can't note, because when you go there, you say, "Where's the mountain?" There's just this dome on top and so forth. So let me explain to you how that works. So that wall is transparent because when King Solomon came, he built the first temple, and it looked like this. And so you can still see the mountain there, right? And you can still see the mountains around nearby, and some of the palaces of nearby where King Solomon's where King Solomon's palace was, and that was the first temple. And there was a retaining wall, as you see around there. that wall becomes very important, that outer wall, because when it comes to the second temple, the Jews came back, they built the temple like it, and then later Herod said, that's not nearly impressive enough. So he started to build up
under here.
Under here.
The mountain is the same mountain is under here, but Shlomo built an entire flat platform on top of it.
Right. And if you look in the front, in this area here, this section right here, when they show you the coastal modern B, the Western Wall, that's what you're seeing. Just this little section, and even then it was chopped down. It's 1/3 the height of what it was in the time of the Second Temple. So you have really very little vision of how big and how massive this entire temple was. At least
where was that in relation to the front of the temple, like where you would go into the temple?
This is the back. So we come to the back of the temple, to the back of the temple.
Front is
okay.
Front, the way we come in would be that way.
Oh, okay.
On the eastern side. This is a view from the western side.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's just that time. If you take the tunnels tour, they take you on a tour of the tunnel and they take you the whole length over, and you begin to get a sense of how long and how big and how impressive it was, and how huge the stones were too. But you have no real sense of really how impressive this was. It was one of the great wonders of the world. And the rabbis even said, if you didn't see Herod's temple, you never saw a beautiful building. And even Titus didn't want to destroy it because it was one of the wonders of the world. And this year, we took a tour of this particular area where this ramp came in from the west to the new city. The old city is over here on this hill. So, it was just amazing. They were showing these things, they called them pilasters because they don't put columns down. It looked like sort of like a column embedded in a wall. And they had waterfalls coming down, and it was just amazing to see. What it must have been some gorgeous sight, with just in a desert country, every few feet another fountain was springing out, and you walked along this fountain path into the temple. It was just amazing. It's just amazing.
Did you walk the whole length of the tunnel?
This is what the Temple Mount looks like today.
Well, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay,
so then, after it was destroyed, this is sort of like this was at the time of the very beginning of the Arab Empire. So that's what it looked like. Again, nothing around it, but they put their gold dome on top where the temple was, and they put originally it didn't even have a dome on top. It was a Roman thing with 6. Arabs don't make that kind of shape as things, hexagon shapes. Just never in the Arab world. So it was a Roman thing. And then they'd said, okay, fine, we're going to take it over and use it as a mosque so they built their thing on top. And then, of course, today, this is what it looks like roughly. Oh, no.
Does that mean that portion of the temple still exists today?
So that's what you get into my topic. Beginning of my topic. So here's what it looks like today. So you can sort of get this progression of how things look, So there's the Western Wall, what's left where we pray and so forth. And most of it is covered with trees and the mosques and the other kinds of stuff. And that's...
Is there anything left underneath the mosque of the original temple?
You're leading into my talk for today. You're leading into my talk. So let's go through it. So the Rebbe wants us to learn, there's a section in the Yad HaZaka, the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. He has a set of 8 chapters where he talks about the construction of the temple. Because the Rambam, unlike any other book of law, he wrote it in 1100, any other book of law, usually the books of law say the laws that are relevant to today. The Rambam said, I'm going to write a book that covers all of Jewish law, whether we can do it today or not do it today. So he brings all laws about the sacrifices, about the building of the temple, about medical practices and so forth. Anything that's part of the legal code of Judaism, he talks about. And in his 14 volumes, Yad is Yudalad, Chazaka, gives 8 chapters to the subject about how the temple was built and how it was then later, how did the Kohanim serve in the temple, what did they wear, and the other kinds of things. So when he talks about the building of the temple, he first has the first chapter, which just says, in general, there's a temple and you have to build it. It had to be built right in this one place. and it had different built room parts to it. It had a Holy of Holies, it had a holy part, it had a building around there called the Heichal. Around there was a bigger area, and then there was a women's courtyard, and there was a men's courtyard, and there was an altar, and then there was different furniture inside, which I'm using the term furniture loosely. There was a table, a shulchan, and there was a. Wait, is still my book here? No, did you take my book? Because I had another.
This is your book?
Yeah.
Oh, this is mine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I mean, there were various elements inside of there. Took the paper page out. Yes,
No.
you did. Yeah, there was one page that I marked. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Okay, I will find it here. And, they would, every time they brought offerings, the Levium were all singing there. They were blowing trumpets and so forth. Every time they bring an offering, various illustrations. These are all artistic ideas. They're not necessarily exactly how things were. Right. Menorah, were incense things. And then what was in the Holy of Holies, the Rambam says this was the ark. The ark that was built by Moses, by Bezalel for Moses, that was carried in the wilderness, the golden ark, and inside were the luchos. In front of it was Aaron's staff and the flask of mun to remind the people what they were fed in the wilderness, and that was in the Holy of Holies. And then you had a nice picture in here. I think it wasn't here. It was, where was it? All right.
The ark was big enough to hold the tablets because
Oh,
that
yeah.
picture doesn't look that big.
No, it doesn't. This is a scale model.
It was big.
They build scale models. They don't want to build things out of gold. It's not the full scale. It was 2.5 almost by 2.5. You make a little scale model, and then you give people a sense of, just like Emily was telling us before the class, that she went to this park outside in Jerusalem, and they
It
had
was
something.
45 inches wide, approximately.
They had a scale model that was about 20 by 40 or 40 feet, the whole temple and so forth, that and the buildings in the old city around there. It's a very interesting model somebody built. Anyway, we want to get a class going. So what did the Rambam say? So the Rambam says the following. He says, first off, he describes the building, he describes then the furniture, he describes then the various structures in the buildings, the courtyards and so forth. And then in the 4th chapter, he begins to start talking about the Holy of Holies and the Ark. And he says, an interesting thing about the Ark. He says that when there came a time in Jewish history, there was a King Yoshiahu. He was the 4th of the last kings of Israel, of the first line, the 4th to last king, because the last king was there was Yoshiahu, there was Yoachim, and then there was Sidkiyahu, and Sidkiyahu was killed by Babylonians, and the Jews were taken to Babel. So Yoshiahu lived at a time of great Jewish prosperity, and the Rambam starts explaining and says, in the time of King Yoshiahu, he called together the Levium, and he told them, now is the time for you to take the ark, to lift it up and carry it, and to bring it into the place, the tunnels underneath the temple, which Shlomo built originally. He built a place underneath. The only way to get there, is to go by paths that are akumim and lulim and hidden paths, hidden and twisty paths, crooked paths, to go down into this underground cavern. And there you should put the Aaron, and there you should put Aaron's staff, the one that blossomed and so forth, and you should put the mun. And that will, and from then on, we will not have the ark in the Holy of Holies. And it never returned. Even at the time of the Second Temple, there was no ark. There was no ark there. It was an empty room. And that was the case. It never came back into the temple. And he says in the same thing, there was these things called the Urim and Tumim that the Kohen wore, which were on his. I don't know if it was a physical thing or wasn't the breastplate itself, but anyway, the Rambam says they didn't function. They were there because his clothes had to be complete, but they were vehicles by which the king could come and get a prophecy and get a direct answer from God. He had a question of God. You go there, you ask the Kohen Gadol, There was a process. His breastplate would light up, and you get an answer direct from God. The letters would light up, and you get an answer of what you're supposed to do. Those were the Urim and Tumim. There was a miracle that was of the first temple, but not of the second temple. The Rebbe asked the following questions. First thing he says is, this is a nice, interesting story. It's a complicated story. It's an interesting story, but do we have to know this in order to build the temple? Which is a good question. It's not the Rambam's way to just tell you stories for story's sake. Usually he tells you something because you need to know it in order to fulfill a mitzvah, not in order to know history. And this is a history story. More than that. Do we really need to know that that King Solomon built this place, or that's where the ark is today, or that it's in a twisty passages, or do we have to know that it doesn't seem like very important. In fact, it seems like it's contradictory. I mean, why should you be talking about the something that was sort of like, seems like a plan B, that when the temple is going to be destroyed, you need to hide it underneath. It's out of place. Something's not clear about the whole story, and why we need to know that this is an important fact, and who did it, and why it was King Yoshiyahu that did it. I mean, I'm bringing up these points. And then there's another question, which is that this whole story doesn't come until the 4th chapter, which is a strange place to put it. If you're going to talk about the things that were in the temple, then talk about it in the earlier chapters when we talked about the furniture in the temple. But now it's already talked about we talked about the whole building of the temple. It's the wrong place. It should be the rest. It should be with the table, the shulchan, should be together with the menorah, should be together with the other items that were put in the temple, not separate from the temple. You might think these are side questions, but they really are very important, and down to the very important things. We're going to tell you why this is not just an intellectual class, but something very relevant to who we are and what we need to know today. So the Rebbe brings up the point, that idea, and he says, listen, we know, first fact, one fact. People go to the Kosa. People go to and pray there, and they pray very hard, and they feel something. Many people feel something, and even if they don't even know why, they feel something very moving and very powerful when they go there. And there's I was there for 3 weeks. I couldn't stop going every morning, early in the morning. I had to go. I had to be there. Chakris has to be at the Koso. And it's just like it's a dry. Why? And the people put on tefillin there, never did, wouldn't be interested. It's just something's going on there. So the rabbis say that the holiness, the Shekinah, never left from the Kosel Maravi, that the holiness never departed from the temple. And so some rabbis try and explain it and say, oh, that's because the Aron, the holiest item in the temple, is still there. It's underneath. It's just in a hidden passageway underneath, because the whole place is carved. There's tunnels and tunnels and tunnels under that mountain, and the Arabs have all blocked off all the entrances, but it's still there. It's still around, and it's still functioning. And therefore, when you go there, you are next to the holiest place in the world. And that's why everybody wants to have a building there on top, whatever, because they sense it. They sense that there's something special about that location, and they don't want to give it up. Okay, the Rebbe says that's not enough of an answer, because it still doesn't answer the other questions of why did the Rambam have to give us all these detail after detail of the process. And even at the beginning, it seems like Shlomo did something wrong. I mean, every detail of how the temple is supposed to be built was described by God and he said how big it is, how the altar has to be so big, the walls have to be so high, there has to have these many doors. Every detail is very, very precise. It was given prophetically to the Jews of how to build this place. King David and King Solomon were told. So Solomon deciding on his own to build something underneath as an escape hatch doesn't sound right. So the Rebbe says, that little clue of the misplacement of the story is the hate. Because here's the point. We need to make it slow and clear. Aaron the ark is not just another piece of furniture that goes in the temple, but rather it is actually part and parcel of the temple itself. The temple is not a temple without the essence, the core thing of what makes it a temple, which is the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies makes it a temple. Without the temple, without the Holy of Holies, it is not, without the ark, it is not Holy of Holies, it is not a temple. And the Rebbe says that brings up a really big question that the Rambam says, I got to answer this. Because in the second temple, you didn't see any ark. So if there's no ark, what kind of a temple did they build there? There's no temple. There's no temple. It's not a temple. There's no Beit HaMikdash. There's no Beit HaMikdash without the ark. So you have to have the ark to have the Beit HaMikdash. So how do we understand that? That is why the Rambam is telling you this story. And he says, because the story is going to teach you everything about that. He says, excuse me, Noah, the temple is still there. That when King Solomon built the temple to begin with, he built it in mind with there be two places. One place where the ark was revealed and you could see it, and another place, which was by design, where you couldn't see it. But they're both places, and both of it makes a functioning temple. There are times when you have the ark there, and you can see it and you can feel the godliness. And then there is times where it's completely hidden, but it's still there and it's still functioning. It's just working in a hidden way instead of a revealed way. Which tells you a very interesting thing. It tells you that, you know what? The temple was destroyed, but the second temple is not a new temple. It's a continuation of the first temple. It's just the first temple where the ark is hidden. And even the third temple is not a new temple. It's still the same thing. And the Rebbe unbelievably connects this to the idea of how after Mashiach comes, there'll be Tchias HaMesim. And the body will come back. Everyone will come back from the essence of what's called the loose bone. The loose bone is a bone in the back of the neck, the top bone of the spine, that is indestructible. They know it's indestructible because they found it in the crematoriums in the Holocaust, and it never was destroyed. You couldn't burn it, couldn't destroy it. Nobody understood why. Because the body will come back, because the essence of the person will come back to it, and the body will be the same body again, because the Jew cannot be destroyed. And so just like
say that word again. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the term?
Just as the Jew cannot be, the temple cannot be destroyed and the Holy of Holies cannot be destroyed, it's just hidden. So too, that essence, that bone, that in the body of the Jewish body cannot be destroyed. Nobody can affect the temple. Nobody can destroy it. They can appear to destroy it, but in essence, it stays around. The same thing as with the Jewish body. The Jewish body is also indestructible, because that bone is the essence of the person, and it will be rebuilt, and then it will be the same person all over again. Because
can you tell me where the bone is? I feel bad to interrupt.
Back of the
I'm
neck,
sorry.
top bone of the spine on the neck.
Okay, thank you.
So is it like C1, cervical 1? Or?
Yeah.
Horn.
Yeah.
Is it, does everybody, Jewish and non-Jewish have it?
There's a discussion whether non-Jews will be revived in the death. There are savers that say them too. Also, even non-Jews will have a Tchias HaMesim. I'm not going to try and run into that subject, because I'll lose track of what I'm trying to explain here, because there's more ideas here that are very relevant, and we need to get those ideas ready, because it's very important in a time of destruction. Because, people feel that they were destroyed and they were wiped out and their lives were called about. So what we're learning from this idea is that, from the beginning, from the design, God had a plan. And the plan is that there are two ways of existing. So the temple and the two ways, and our bodies and our lives also mirror that. The temple was laid out in the shape of a human being, especially you see that in Yechezkel's vision of the third temple, and there, because we are a mirror of a larger spiritual reality, which exists on the spiritual level of what the temple is. So the physical temple down below is a mirror of how it is above, and our service and who we are in our body and our heart, our head, belly, and so forth also mirrors that particular dynamic of the Adam HaKadmon is called in Kabbalah. The supernal man is reflected down in the physical man down below. So we have this too, that we also experience certain times of where we think ourselves in a case of destruction. It's a dark tunnel and nothing is coming out of it. And the message is obviously is, hello, there are two, God had this from the beginning. He planned to have you both good times and bad times. And the bad times are not necessarily just the times where you're hibernating, but rather it's just a part where your powers and are being tested, so that you will later reveal the greater part inside of you. Ultimately, as Hasidus explains, every descent is for the sake of ascent. Every time you go down into in this world, every time things get terrible, everything's go bad, it is actually helping you return, go back. And that is why King Yoshiyahu told those Levium to carry it down into the passageways, which are hidden and which are twisty and which are crooked, because life sometimes makes one twisty and crooked. And sometimes you go off the path. And sometimes you do averas, and sometimes you do sins. And nevertheless, that was all part of the plan from the beginning. God wanted to be able for you to do tshuva. And through the power of tshuva, you actually show, return, repentance, say some people retain, it's not a good word, return. Through that process, you actually reveal a greater holiness, because you see that nothing can keep a person down, because eventually everybody will return, everybody will do tshuva, everybody will do it. And that will reveal ultimately the third Beit HaMikdash in a revealed open way. That is the idea of this period of time, and that is why the Rebbe, I think, is really emphasizing to learn these laws, because when you learn them well, you see that, you know what, it's not the appearance of there not being a not revealed art. It's just an appearance. There were Urim and Tumim, items which helped you see prophecy in the first temple, and that was revealed. They existed in the second temple. They just didn't function in an open way. That is why the Rambam connected the two ideas together. There can be the outer appearance, but nevertheless, it's still functioning below the surface. I read an interesting article about this the other day. It was talking about, a human being is, can be compared to like a snake. A snake, every once in a while, it has to molt. And when it molts, what it does is it actually bites a hole in its skin, and it says, I got to get out of here. I got to get bigger. And therefore it escapes. Now, if it sticks on the level of the snake on the skin, it's gonna explode. It's too compressed. So human beings also need sometimes to realize that there's a deeper thing inside of themselves, how they viewed themselves, how they thought of themselves as who I am, what I can do, what am I able to do. Sometimes you have to molt that outer skin, and you have to go find the inner part inside of you. Everything we learn in Judaism is all about this idea that, yes, it is difficult to molt your skin. It is difficult to go through what do butterflies go through? A chrysalis metamorphosis. There's another term for that. Yeah, that's what that term is, when they molt their, so that's difficult. It's difficult. Yeah, difficult things in life. God said there are difficult times. Difficult times does not mean that you're abandoned. Difficult times means that there is still a holiness there that can never be destroyed, that can never be hurt, and it still is underneath, it's still functioning, and it's still holy. It's just not happening in a way that's not openly and directly revealed. And that is the lesson of, I think, for the 3 weeks. That is the lesson of the art. That is the lesson of the holiness of the temple is never left. And so that's what and who did this? It was King Yoshiyahu, who was not in a time of darkness. He didn't do it as an escape hatch. He didn't do it because things were terrible. He didn't do it as a second plan B. He did it as from the beginning. He did it for the plan because Shlomo, King Solomon, at the beginning knew that this was just as much a place for the art. This was just as much a place where there would be holiness. And therefore, he was not doing something that was just a plan B. He was actually knowing at the beginning that this was part of God's plan at the beginning. Yes, life will have good and life will have bad. There will be destruction and there will be bad. That doesn't mean that that it's something went wrong. Something didn't go wrong. The plan was to go, that we were supposed to go through this period of time in order to get to the bigger place. And as I said last week, it's also the plan that when water goes underneath in these underground rivers and so forth, the ultimate goal is that it will come out as a wellspring later on. That is our lesson. That is the lesson about ourselves. And that is why I didn't say it last week, but I remembered it after the class. I said, I got to say this. This is a real kicker. So at one point in time, Moshe was shown our generation, and our generation to his generation looks like it doesn't compare at all. And we don't have nearly the kind of holiness or spirituality or connectiveness. And Moses was completely overwhelmed by us. Why? The rabbi said, because he said these people, they have so little to go on. No prophets, no temple, no open miracles of the Urim and Thummim lighting up and telling them and giving the directions for God. And yet they're still coming back and they're still doing and they're still moved and they still feel things about their Jewishness. And they still do what they, as much kashrus and whatever they can do and so forth. And Moses was saying, I cannot believe it, They have so little gas to go on. And look what they're doing. I don't understand. He was just completely overwhelmed by it. So we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we're doing. We don't realize how much that everything that we do matters and is affected and having an effect. Because we look at it the external way, and we look at it like the skin of the snake, and we don't really see what's going on inside. And I think I have used up my time. Thank you very much. And we will talk again next week. Yes, you had a question, but Emily, you're muted. So I'm not.
May I ask my request or should I?
Oh, so it's Surrey that's muted. Okay, good. Go ahead.
So Molly, you would ask me this, anyone who was in earshot, if you could pray for my cousin. Her name is Yochanan Bat Frida. She's going to have actually 2 valves in her heart replaced next week. So prayers would be greatly welcomed. Thank you.
Yochanan Bas, it sounds like a man's name. Yochanan Bas Frida.
Bas Frida.
No, what's the first name?
Yochanan.
Is a man?
No,
No.
it's a woman.
It's a woman.
Suri
And it
explained that some people
It
have.
has an end at the end of it.
Her name is Janice.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the end of my
Maybe Yochanan. Maybe Yochanan.
Bas Frida.
Yochanan.
Frida.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you so
not
much.
ending. Shlomo, this is up. Don't run away. If you are listening on YouTube, here comes our star speaker. You want some lights on?
Let me see if I can manage without the lights. If not, I'll turn them on. Okay.
Be right back.
Okay, tell me the name again.
Thank you. Thank you, Yechezkel Shimon.
It's either Yochanan or Yochanan Bas Frida.
Wow, that's really a man's name. It's interesting. Okay. Okay, good. Yochanan Bas Frida. Okay, good. So does anybody want to say anything before I begin?
I'll be right back. I'm just gonna-
So, so I'm going to begin by saying quickly the 4 things I always say, which is number 1, we are in a unique time, and we're in an extraordinary time. And the Rebbe told us, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who has 100% batting average for all his predictions, and he made wild predictions, and they all came true. He told us that the redemption of the world and the Jewish people in the world has begun. A process called Messianic Age, the Geula, there are many different names for it, we're beginning that process right now. And the second thing is that our souls were handpicked to be here at this point, this amazing juncture in human history. Number 3, that we were given all the tools we need to navigate this time. We were given the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we were given the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And number 4, that what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption, actively speeds it up. The Rebbe said there's no way to speed it up faster than by learning about it. That's the fastest, that's the thing you can do to accelerate it. So, I'm going to talk briefly about the 3 weeks. So Yechezkel Shimon talked about it. These are 3 weeks on the Hebrew calendar. It's from the 17th of Tammuz through the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av. In the secular calendar, it corresponds to the 3 hottest weeks of the year. 3 weeks in which the sun is at a very, very, very intense part. Very, very, in Israel, in America, it's very, very intense right now. As we can see this year, it's incredibly intense right now. And the odd thing is they're called the 3 weeks of calamity because they include very inauspicious dates on the Jewish calendar. Terrible things happen during this time. As Yescalshim said, the first temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. Second temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. World War I began on the 9th of Av. And World War II, historians consider it not a separate entity. They consider it just a continuation of World War I. So that really the whole World War process began on Tisha B'Av. And we're also taught an interesting thing, that these 3 weeks, which are considered times of calamity, I'm going to turn off the air conditioner because it's awfully noisy. Just 1 second. Okay. So these 3 weeks, in the height of the summer, actually will be the most elevated time in the time of Mashiach. They will surpass all the holidays. It says in the time of Mashiach, when the Messianic age is fully realized, we will still have all our holidays. We will still have Sukkot, Pesach, and Simcha, and Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos. And we'll have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but the fast days in our time, the fast days that commemorate calamities that happened to the Jewish people, are going to be, the light from those days are going to be much brighter than the light of any of the holidays that we have now. They will be overturned into times of joyous rejoicing. They're going to be bigger holidays than anything we know now. They're going to be bigger than Rosh Hashanah, bigger than Yom Kippur. The light of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the 3 other festivals are going to still be there, but they will recede in brightness compared to the general time of the Messianic era, the general days of Mashiach. And in particular, they're going to recede tremendously compared to these days of calamity. And the Rebbe says that if you look now, you can see that they fall in the time of year in which the sun is at its zenith. The sun is at its most blazing, and it's an analogy. The sun is an analogy for God, and just like the sun is pouring down its heat right now, pouring down its light, so too Hashem is actually doing that right now. There's tremendous holiness. It's just that because of different things that we did, it came down for many centuries in a disfigured way. But when we correct our failings, when we do teshuva, when the world comes back to Hashem, we're going to see the true nature of this time, which is in a time of intense love of Hashem to the Jewish people and to the world. So anyway, this year, I have to say, this year I've already seen, usually people are afraid of the 3 weeks. They're afraid of things that happen in the 3 weeks. And people are more cautious in the 3 weeks. It says that if, they're cautious about things that they do. But the Rebbe says the process of overturning these 3 weeks has already begun. And I'll give you just 2 little things that I heard in the past week that to me are signs that, you know what, the transformation is already beginning. There's somebody who's a member of my extended family, and she had battled breast cancer, and she had come out victorious. And just a couple of weeks ago, she was at the doctor's office, and he examined her, and he said, it's back. And I hate to tell you this, but from what I'm seeing, I think it's stage 4 now. And so the family went into started saying Psalms. They started saying Tehillim. And I wrote to the Rebbe for this person. And this person went back for a PET scan. And they went in for the results of the PET scan. And they were there for 2 minutes. The doctor said, "There's nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Go home." It showed absolutely nothing. Now, there's another story that happened just a few days ago. And if you listen to the secular media, the secular news media, you will not have heard about it. At least not, none of the secular news media covered it as of yesterday. Maybe they picked it up today, but none of them covered it. It's already a few days old. And it's a remarkable story. Does anybody know the story about the woman who fell from Niagara Falls? You should have heard about it. It's a stunning miracle. And not one of those silly secular media, not NBC, ABC, CNN, nothing. They won't cover a story about a wonderful thing that happened to a Jew, especially if it's an Orthodox Jew. So, because, we're supposed to be terrible people, we're supposed to be, barbarians. I don't know what we're supposed to be. But anyway, this is what happened. There was a Chabad woman, and she was at Niagara Falls with her extended family. She apparently has a nice sized family. She's got a bunch of kids. And her husband, they were hiking on a path around Niagara Falls. And her husband was ahead with some of her kids. She was walking with her 8-year-old daughter, and a bunch of brother-in-laws and their wives and their kids were behind them. And she's walking on and she said she doesn't know how it happened. She was walking on a very nicely paved path, and she must have tripped or something. And she found herself sliding towards the precipice, sliding towards the cliff. And she couldn't stop herself. And it was like she was seeing herself in slow motion. She's sliding towards a cliff with a sheer drop, and she can't stop herself. And she sees like a root of a tree, and she's sliding head first. She sees this root of a tree. She grabs onto the root of the tree, and all that it succeeds in doing is it swings her around so that her head is now on land and her feet are heading off the cliff. And she can't hold on anymore, and she starts falling. And she said it was like a bizarre fall. It felt to her like she was in Hashem's hands. She was just floating through the sky. The paramedics who picked her up afterwards said that they felt it was a 90-foot drop. Her husband said he thinks it's at least 50 feet, but the paramedics had said it's 90 feet. It was a sheer drop. She fell through the air and she landed on the ground. And she landed on the ground, and she was stunned, and she said, "Wait a minute, I'm okay. And she was bleeding. She had a cut on her face. She had some cuts on her arm, and she actually did fracture a mild fracture to one of her vertebrae, but it didn't prevent her from sitting, from walking. She starts her 8-year-old daughter, thank God, didn't run after her. Her 8-year-old daughter had been standing in her place, and her 8-year-old daughter said, "Mommy, don't! Mommy, stop!" And the 8-year-old ran to get her father when she went over the cliff, and she said, "Tati, Mommy fell off the cliff." And he ran back, and he knew, this is the end. My wife can't exist anymore. She's going to be smashed into a million pieces. And he runs to near where she fell, and he hears her voice. "I'm okay down here." And there are 3 veteran hikers who are near the area at that time, and they say, "We know this place. We're gonna go help her." And they took a zigzag route that they knew to go, and they didn't go straight over like she did. They took a zigzag route down to her. And when they got to her, they talked to her to keep her calm until the paramedics came. She's a pregnant lady. Did I add that thing?
Oh my God.
Lady. And the paramedics have to get to her through a boat. There's no other way to get to her. So they got to her through a boat. They picked her up, and they take her to the nearest hospital, which is where they take everybody who fell off of Niagara Falls. It's not it happens, and they're talking to her the whole time, and the woman, the nurse who's receiving the ambulance screams at the paramedics, "Why didn't you intubate her?" And they said, "Because she's talking to us the whole time and she's making jokes." And so they brought her in, and they checked her out, and then they said "Should we check out your baby? Should we give?" I don't know what kind of test they gave her.
Ultrasound.
And probably an ultrasound. And she said, "Absolutely, absolutely." And they hear a nice heartbeat. And it wasn't until whatever the test was, probably an ultrasound, that the baby was irritated. The baby started kicking because of the ultrasound, not because of the fall or anything else. And I heard it from her own lips. I heard it on whatever it was sent to me, and it's a beautiful story. It's such an interesting story about how a woman, like, she's a Chabad woman, and the entire time she's thinking, she spent the night in the hospital, one night in the hospital to check her out, and the entire time she's thinking, what is my shlichus? Meaning, why did God put me in this situation? There must be something I'm supposed to do here. What am I supposed to do? So she heard other women in work, and she's not in bad shape. She heard other women who were in bad shape, and she said Tehillim for them. She said Psalms for them, and she didn't want to tell her story, but she anyway, it's covered by all the Jewish media. You can look on COLLIVE. You can look on any Jewish site. You can look on AZ, which is not AZ, A7, which is an abbreviation for Aretz Sheva. It's a Jewish news service from Israel. And you can hear her. I hope one of them at least picked up the verbal story, because it's fascinating. And the Chabad rabbi from Niagara Falls, there's a Chabad rabbi who is the rabbi over that area. He came to visit her when she was in the hospital. And he said, "I want you to know that I do this many times. I go to the hospital many times." And he said, "And it's never a situation like yours. I go to the hospital to pick up body parts and to send them back to the families." What?
Did she actually roll down the hill, or did
She didn't roll. Oh, she slid off the cliff and fell through the air.
through the
A sheer
air?
drop, anywhere from 50 to 90 feet, a sheer drop. Most people would be smashed into a million pieces.
What broke her fall, did she say?
She just fell on the ground. Nothing broke her fall. She fell
Nothing.
straight on the ground, and she only she fractured one vertebra. And
That's amazing.
it's an amazing thing. So anyway, these may have been these, the days that the days of fasting on these 3 weeks. It begins with a fast day and it ends with a fast day. The 17th of Tammuz, which we already passed, and it ends with Tisha B'Av. And the Rebbe says and this year, both of those days fall on Shabbos, on Shabbat. So we're not allowed to fast. And the Rebbe said that this is a forte since these days are days with two faces. There are days with a face of calamity and days with a face of tremendous joy. He said, when the fast days fall out on Shabbos and you're not allowed to fast, he said, that's a taste of what these days are actually going to be. And so not this Shabbos is the 2nd of Av. This Saturday will be the 2nd of the month of Av, but the Saturday after this one, the Shabbos after this one, is going to be Tisha B'Av. And we're not allowed to fast because it's Shabbos, and you should eat like a king and a queen. to commemorate, to taste the true essence of this day, which is a day of tremendous, tremendous joy and overturning of all the mysteries and all the bad stuff into good stuff. So I'm going to do a short class because it's almost 8 o'clock. I'm going to do a short session today. Next week, I have a very good story. And next week, we're going to continue our theme. We're going to do Creating Intimacy Part 4 and how to create intimacy with God, with somebody that you want to create intimacy with, how to create a truly tight bond. So I'm going to end the recording and ask if anybody